Right, it is indeed a very, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It is another Friday. It's another Sheria Wiki edition of the tackle, being the Friday of 2nd June 2023, tarehe 2 mwezi wa 6 mwaka ni 2023. Tumai kwamba uko salama, umeamka vizuri, and you're ready to tackle your day. As usual, please like when you like, we get to know that you're watching us, and that share. When you share, you give someone else an opportunity to watch the broadcast. When you please like when you like, we get to know that you're watching us, and that please share. Share, you give someone else an opportunity to watch the broadcast. This is the tackle, the 2nd of June, Sheria Wiki Edition. Na kama kawaida tuko na Dr.Ekuru Aukot will be helping us as well look at the biggest conversation in the country right now, ambaye kila mtu anaongelea, hata mama mboga na ule mtu wa village. It's a finance bill, and everybody is giving us an opinion of what they think. But then again, very few people have taken the time to break it down and and give us bits and pieces that we can digest and ingest. And Ekuru has done that for us through Third Way Alliance Kenya. They've broken it down and they have done a memo. So he'll take us through some of the proposals that are in the bill. We'll also be looking at some that they have shared with us. You can see that we can have a conversation, and you can also give us your feedback. And also we have Michael Otieno, he's a finance expert as well. He's been here. It's not his first time on the tackle. He's been here before. So he'll also be helping us to give it some level of perspective, to make some sense out of the bill. Remember, these are the bills that affect you. If it passes, it will affect you positively or negatively as June comes in. So that's the budget that's going to run for the whole year. So it's very important that you pay attention and get to understand that what is really being proposed. And I think even the MPs have not read this document. If you ask me, when you listen to members of parliament, the arguments they're bringing up about this, they're almost pure grapevine. And remember, these are the people who are going to make the judgment for you in parliament. These are the guys who are going to pass it. They're going to reject it, either way. Those who are rejecting are saying we don't even want to look at it. We have just rejected. And those who are supporting it are saying we are going to pass it. Yeah, whether you get me or ndekne.
Yeah, they'll pass it with or without amendment.
Na wala wanakataa wanasema we don't even want to look at it. You know, we are rejecting it in totality. In totality. All right. Very quickly, kama kwenda lazima tuende mbele za Mungu tuombe. Tukirudi basi tunakuja kuona nani ameweza kuamka mapema hii. Mighty Father, I come before this morning. We worship you, God, for your name. Thank you for another for opportunity to be alive. We thank you for this show. We thank you for every tackler. We thank you for this conversation as we have it. May it edify the fabric of this country. We pray, trusting and believing. Amen. Haya, asante sana. Let's see who is up this morning. That one anaweza kuamka kidogo kama. Haya, Johnson, good morning to you. Mwanga later continue all the way from Convent to United Kingdom. Hapa ndio ulikuanga daktari.
I was in Coventry, yes.
Yeah, so he's in
Warwick,
Coventry, United Kingdom. Good to be part of this.
That's a serious, that's a hard tackler.
This guy has been
always on time.
On the first from day one.
Yes.
Up to now. When nitakuwa napeana ukombe, huyo ndiye atapata.
Sasa unafaa unaandikia certificate of participation.
Certificate of loyalty.
Kwanza unatuma. Unapeperusha kwa mtandao.
Sana Mungu alita continue. Thank you so much for being part of all the conversations that we have had here. And for you supporting us. Thank you so much. May God bless you. Okay, Party, good morning. Good morning to you, my brother. Just got tuned in from Litten. Litten, Mambo VP, good morning. Hope you're doing well as well this morning. Let's look at the newspapers very quickly. Let's look at the newspaper headlines. The Standard State steps up plans for shillings 250 billion euro bond. Euro bond inakuja 250 billion. As Villa always in control of European Imperial. Get your copy of the fresh of New Look Nairobi. And more promises as Kenya turns 60. Yesterday was Madaraka Day. Kenya is officially 60. It was celebrating its 60th birthday. And yesterday the birthday was held in Embu. So Kenya is officially 60 years old. And maybe as you reflect as a Kenyan, what are some of the wins or some of the things that you think have not happened in this country so far? What do you feel as a country turns 60? Okay, if a guy who died in 1963 was to wake up today, would they be proud of what the country has become? Okay. President William Ruto yesterday urged the country to back its reform plan, saying the future can only be safeguarded through the measures he's putting in place, like housing fund and job creation. The highlights affordable housing program aims to enable Mama Mboga access and afford a mortgage and embark on a journey towards home ownership too. Prioritizing the processing and value addition of agricultural products. This is being achieved through the establishment of county industrial parks. Number 3, government has stepped up the establishment of 5 additional export zones in next financial year in Sagana, Thika, Njoro, Eldoret, and Busia. Border borders will be able to ride electric motorcycles by September to cope with rising international petroleum prices. Okay, interesting right there. 5, government is committed to delivering universal healthcare coverage that enables every Kenyan to attain dignified healthcare at very minimal cost. Number 6, the National Open University will obtain its charter this month, and courses are being uploaded for commissioning. Okay, looking in at the newspaper is here. The People Daily. Koome on collision caused with employer. That's P14. Goske reads the Riot Act to corrupt state officers, and Goske said that there's no way you can convince Kenyans that public service is not corrupt. My public service runs on corruption. Okay.
That's very true.
I've
had some very interesting experience. For some of us who are probably advantaged, we know a lot of people in public offices. We even have their personal numbers. But sometimes you go to those public offices and actually you don't get a service. It has made me think, what about a Kenyan who do not know individuals in this office? If I get so much delayed, don't even get service at the end of the day. What about Kenya wa kawaida ambaye ajui hao watu? It really makes me wonder. In fact, so the whole idea of public service, an office in the public service, who are they really serving? Yeah, I'm not saying we should be privileged just because, but sometimes you cannot avoid. If I know you as my friend, you as my friend, and I've got an issue, I'll call him. But sometimes you go to those offices, bana, kuna service. Now wewe ujiulize tu Mkenya wa kawaida. Wewe umeenda umechapa miguu ama umepanda matatu umeenda kwa hizo ofisi. Will anybody even attend to you?
Nobody might not even.
It's really a big problem. This is something that we really need to discuss.
And public service, actually, someone needs to have a conversation around public service and the attitude of public service. And there's kind of attitude about public service that has never changed. And maybe it's time.
And also the other thing that I find a bit as an anomaly is the idea that people go to queue to see, individuals in charge of these offices. Sometimes I look at the practicality of it. Is it really possible? And that just tells you there's a shortfall in terms of service provision. Because if I'm not receiving a service from a public office, that's why people throng into these public spaces, offices. Unakuta watu wamepanga huko laini. Hata unashindwa huu minister, PS, CS, ataona watu wangapi. Okay. So there's a lacuna.
Okay. It's an opportunity to dispense favors. So, and once even the service seeker views it as that, then definitely they'll not. I think the debate should be: does the public even know that they have a right to service? That is one of the challenges that you find in these spaces. Because at the end of the day, if I don't know that it is my right, then if I don't get the service, I would not complain. I would simply see it as, he is not giving me a favor, so I can try my luck tomorrow. So the beginning point should be the public should be educated to clearly understand that because I'm a taxpayer, it is my right to get a service, and I can demand for it from a public officer. Then the public officer will have no option but to reciprocate, sufficiently. And of course, then it has to be accompanied with sufficient, carrot and stick.
But I feel that in the context of Sheria Wiki here, maybe let's take this time to educate Kenyans. You see, a lot of people have not read Article 6 of the Constitution of Kenya. In fact, Bitok, let's read this article. See, Article 6 of the Constitution of Kenya talks about devolution of services to each and every part of the Republic of Kenya. Now, when you see people throwing these public offices, especially in Nairobi or in the capitals of every county, it tells you a story that those services have not been devolved to each and every part of the Republic of Kenya. Because that's what the Constitution says. I just want to read the words verbatim for tacklers. Because then it tells you there's actually a shortfall in terms of how these services are actually devolved. This is what Article 6 says. Devolution and access to services. of course, talks about the territory of Kenya divided into counties in the first schedule. Then the government at the national, this is why it becomes interesting. The governments at the national and county levels are distinct and interdependent and shall conduct their mutual relations on the basis of consultation and cooperation. So although they are distinct, national and county government, there is that expectation of interdependence in terms of service provision. That's not been achieved, and that's why you can see the people flock into these offices. But the most important sub-article of that Article 6 is sub-article 3. And it says, a national state organ shall ensure, mandatory, reasonable access to its services in all parts of the Republic, so far as it is appropriate to do so, having regard to the nature of the service. So you'll see a lot of people, they want to come to Nairobi, they want to see ministers, they want to see PSS, because these services have not been devolved to each and every part of the Republic.
So let me just ask you, as a constitutional expert, because sometimes, see, this is the challenge the Kenyans have. So if the constitution gives the leeway of discretion, does then a demand become a right? Like, for instance, if you say reasonable, the word reasonable gives a leeway of discretion. For instance, a public officer would say, well, I would have wished to give you good services, but I don't have sufficient resources to be able to do it, so I can't.
Actually, no. The word reasonable there means there has to be some irreducible minimums in terms of service provision.
Yes.
It says, depending on the nature of the service.
Yes.
Say, for example, say something like security. Security of every person, security of property. The idea basically is at least the government must demonstrate an extent to which it has gone actually to provide that service to the people. It does not. It's not discretion.
So who defines this?
Because the word
minimum.
The word is shall provide. So this is mandatory. But we are also not saying I can necessarily policeman. Each Kenyan must have a police officer standing outside their boma or their gate. But there has to be some reasonable service provision in terms of security. That do I feel safe in the area I live in? If I walk, say, at night, or with there, for example, quick response if I'm under attack. That's what the word reasonable means. We're not saying give us 100%. I know it's not possible. It's not possible to give 100%. But at least there's some extent to which you can demonstrate as a service provider, and in this case, a government, that I have provided a certain service to some extent.
So who defines this irreducible minimum? That would be, is it? If there was some legal confines of this is our irreducible minimum, regardless of whatever the circumstances are, you must provide this level of service.
It's both ways, from the service provider, but also from the service receiver. If, for example, I report a crime, at least an extent to which I expect a turnaround time from, say, the security apparatus, so that extent I can be satisfied. But if I go and report a crime, and then nothing happens for months,
I get it.
or even for weeks. There are places that you go actually to report a crime and you are told, hatuna mafuta.
Na tena unanyongwa na kuuliza, tungependa kukusaidia lakini hakuna mafuta, tume mafuta kwanza. Waambia kuachilie kidogo. Tume mafuta. I think there's a culture that
I've had that. Yeah.
It has happened to you.
Yeah. Actually, when I lost a laptop in the CBD.
And that story.
You got the story? Hey, I was so shocked. So I parked my car between Azina Towers and Anniversary Towers. I went to have coffee at a restaurant up Azina Towers. And of course, these guys, so I put my laptop under beneath the seat. Anyway, Kumbe, I was speaking to the thieves. They were just standing by there. I remember then asking my wife, is it okay to leave my laptop here?
Is it safe? Kumbe, you're briefing.
Kumbe, I'm debriefing. And they're just standing there. So as soon as we walked into the restaurant, they broke into the car, took the laptop. So the askari from my Ndelewa house gave a chase. Fika hiyo roundabout ya St. Paul. So he finds police officers there. Traffic police officers. And he told them, listen, these guys have just broken into somebody's car or maybe your laptop. Walk on a bag. You know what the cops told him? No, hiyo si kazi yetu, enda upige report kwa police station. Sisi tunaangalia mambo magari.
Kazi yetu ni magari, si laptop.
Yeah. This is a police officer who could not stop a theft. Anyway, now this is where it becomes interesting. I go to Central Police Station with this askari, and he was very, very good guy. So we report. We report some officer at DCI. Do you know the guy picked a phone, his phone, and he dialed. And he said, where is Siwa? Wapi ile laptop vijana wako walichukua pale. Me, I'm looking at this guy, I'm so shocked. I was like, say, listen and ask him, what do you mean? You know these guys? I say, yeah, we know. You know, this city as I don't know whether you know the story. If you remember the story of the mafiosos in New York, they used to divide the city of New York into certain block area fulani wezi kukanyaga. So mimi hapa Kiguna nje nikaenda mpaka St. Teresa's, behind St. Teresa's in Eastleigh. Yeah? In some very dingy restaurant. So I met this guy one-on-one. And he tells me, okay, let me try and establish who of my guys took your laptop. He actually made some phone calls. He made a phone call to, a building. It's called Revlon Plaza on Kimadi Street. Then he called Bama Market. And then somewhere in Eastleigh. Then this guy even asked me, okay, what are the specs in your laptop? It was a Toshiba. Back in the days. So I told him Toshiba. I played with him. I told him, boss, Kiza, just do me one favor. There's a folder there.
Oh no, you're talking to the thieves now.
Yeah, I'm telling you. There's just a folder.
Having dialogue.
It's titled PhD. At that time, that's actually how I delayed even getting my PhD for 1 year. Because I lost my research for the whole So this guy told me, okay, you organize some 40K, I'll call you. So we met at the Hilton Hotel several times. So I told him, bwana, chukua kuna CD hapa, just go and, copy for me that folder called PhD. You can keep the laptop, I don't really care. Then he took me around. So I was hiring a taxi. So this cop was telling me, lazima sasa tuweke mafuta kwa taxi, tunulie siji airtime. So I was buying both airtime and fuel. Eventually, I never got the laptop. So I asked this guy, so what happened, bana? And I was working with 40K in my pocket because at the time that was, I think, the price. So he tells me, these guys, I think they checked you out. They think you're a lawyer. You're likely to cause them trouble. That's how I lost my research. I had to go back. Luckily, I had backed up, chapters with a friend in New York. So I had to rewrite the whole thesis with now updated information. I even had the money to buy back my laptop. But I'm telling you, if you hear stories from many Kenyans, you'll be shocked.
It will be very interesting. So one time also, I was just driving up in that car, old Mercedes of mine, the 123. So pale kwa milima, nilitokea pale viewpoint. Hii barabara ya nyuma ya Maimayu, ya malori. So I hit a pothole and I didn't notice. So one wheel cup ikatoka. Chiti ikaingia msituni. So I realized when I'm in Nakuru that I don't have a wheel cup. I said, okay, fine, no problem. So on my way back, I say, let me try and trace my way. So just when I'm doing around into entering that junction that goes to Limuru from the Mayu Road, I see some guys there who have erected like a small makeshift thing. They sell wheel cups. Hey, then I know, and I'm like, that wheel cup looks familiar. So in short, I ended up buying back my own wheel cup at 6,000 shillings. My own wheel cup that I dropped on the road. Yeah. I was buying it back at 6,000. I was telling this guy, this is my wheel cup. As you can see, I'm missing one wheel cup. And clearly, this one, you can see it looks like all these other wheel cups because I painted them blue. To match the color of the car. And like, this wheel cup is mine. Hata kama ni chai unataka basi nikupee. Wakasema hapana, bei ya wheel cups ni 6,000. this my own will come. So there's a culture. Imagine how painful that can be. Listening to Felix Kosgei actually saying all that about the state of how we have actually normalized corruption in this country and misdemeanor of leadership.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. And you're saying the way even matatu owners, they plan in the day, they have a budget. That hii budget ya 2,000 ni askari. Na washa count, you've already counted the roadblocks. Katem gari inatoka asubuhi, you're already minus 2,000. That's not going into fuel or anything, but it's just into bribing the police system. So it's a beautiful admission coming from government. So I hope they get to do something about it.
But having said that, I don't know what thinks. I listened to the president's speech. He never mentioned the word corruption in his entire speech. Yet this is one of the biggest challenges that we have, even at 60 years old as a country. I don't know why. Yet a couple of weeks back, was it last month, he fired the whole KEMSA board because of corruption. Maybe we need to change the lingua Bitok, as you've been saying in this show many times. Remember corruption in English.
Yeah, beautified it too.
I mean, oftentimes I ask myself, why would someone that is in a very well-paying job in the private sector join government that will pay much less? I mean, some of them take as much as more than half of what they have.
Pay cut
in the private sector. And then it gives you the sense that, you see, people are not just in certain public positions for the salary. They are in need for the opportunities to monetize deals.
But you can tell, Michael, you can tell that. Just check. I mean, we all have friends, for example, who have gone into politics and even joined government. Within a short time, they become super rich. I mean, these are people, maybe some classmates,
but
colleagues.
The issue of the president's speech, as I was saying earlier, for me, corruption is a question of action. Not even saying something about it. I mean, if you can demonstrate that it's going to be painful to be corrupt by action, it would be a much better, way of dealing with it than saying, I will, and then you don't. I mean, I think we saw a similar thing with the previous regime where the president was fairly good at verbalizing threats against corrupt individuals, but minimal action.
But me, I've wondered, I've wondered, if I am the President of the Republic of Kenya, I have all the machinery with me. I have the police, I have the NIS, the intelligence service, I have the DCI, and I'm the one who actually picks. I have the DPP, and I appoint those people. And going by what people say, every administration must come with its own people. Meaning, these people must help you actually fulfill your vision of the country. Why then wouldn't I really end the theft of public money when I am the one who picks the Inspector General of Police, the Director of Department of Criminal Investigation, the Director General of NIS, the DPP. I have got the Minister for Interior. I've got,
It's a question of political will. I mean, Dr. You've been in politics, you understand this. Politics in Kenya is so expensive. It doesn't make economic sense for one to engage in politics. The only way one can engage in politics is because it makes a corruption sense to be in politics. So the reason people are in politics is because they know they are going to recover that money, not from economic activities. Well, we may as well define corruption as an economic activity that is sufficient. But they are there not because of the economic activities that they want to engage in, but because of the potential of getting that money back through corruption. So political will begins from the top. Yeah.
So then are we indicting the guy at the top?
Well, you see, on matters of corruption, at the end of the day, the individual that is involved is culpable. But in terms of the need to deal with the individuals that are culpable, in certain cases, sometimes it doesn't make political sense to pursue certain corruption cases That is my thinking. Why? Because the political damage would be far greater.
Then that means you're condoning. No, because you don't want to rattle the feathers.
That again would be like me and you. We are brothers. We respect Jesus together. And then tomorrow you want to crucify me. Would that be fair? How would you look me in the face and crucify me? That is a dilemma that also runs in this.
No, but a wrong is a wrong, Bitok. A wrong is a wrong. And to be honest with you, theft of public money for me, I feel very bad about it. It's not something for me that I can condone because it really affects millions and millions of people. And honestly, if, for example, if I was just to give unsolicited advice to President William Ruto, if I were him, I'll just deal with theft of public money at all 47 counties of Kenya. And he will have an easy time being re-elected in 2027 if he will run again.
All right. Let's read some of the headlines. Ruto, why I will not budge on the new taxes? Finance Bill President vows to implement controversial housing levy, arguing to get jobs even as rolls out the new loan scheme. So he launched ASLA 2 for Chamas, Freedom Faith Key Highlight. Commander-in-Chief rolls out power sharing with rivals. Second phase of ASLA Fund is to benefit groups launched. Head of state maintains that contributing to proposed housing levy fund was a moral obligation for employed Kenyans. Okay, government,
and that's where he fails from a legal perspective. It's so difficult to enforce morality or even to punish it. Yeah.
Okay. Taifa leo silali nikiwaza uchumi. Anasema silali nikiwaza uchumi. Rais amesema kuli kitu yote hata usingizi tawe akiwaza mambo ya uchumi. Madaraka Day apigia debe mpango wa ujenzi wa nyumba za bei nafuu na mswada tata wa fedha. Pia aeleza mikakati ya serikali kuhusu ustawishaji wa kilimo na kazi kwa vijana. Haya, rais aeleza mikakati ya kusuluhisha matatizo ya muda mrefu huku akinyamaza kuhusu changamoto za sasa. Rigathi atetea mswada wa fedha mwaka 2023, adai vyombo vya habari na upinzani wanapotosha raia. Okay. Mshtuko, mateja wawili wakiuawa huzuni Mombasa, wakazi wakiangukiwa na matumbawe hadi kufa. MRC walipewa mafunzo, koti yaambiwa kundi lililotaka kujitenga iliua polisi baada ya mafunzo. Bambika na burudani, Taifa leo. Haya, let's get straight to the point. Kenya at 60 years. Just briefly, what's your feeling as a Kenyan 60 years post-independence?
Every time we talk about Kenya at this age of 59, 60, it takes us back to the independence promises. And for me, I would like to compare it when we got our independence, internal rule, and the promises that were made at that time, that now we have a country, we have got certain problems that we really need to fix. For example, it was promised by our independence fathers that we'll eradicate disease, ignorance, and poverty. But the truth for the matter, Bitok, is even today as we speak, there's too much disease, there's too much poverty, and going to school now has become a very, very expensive affair, extremely expensive. And for me, I feel that as a country, we are losing in investing in our own people and in the future when we actually commercialize education. So I still feel that I'm reminded of the independence days, the early years in our country, when we thought that now we have a country of our own. We are able to fix some of our problems because now we are in charge. Coming back to present day Kenya, if you look at, say, for example, the 47 counties, coming from Turkana myself, for a long time, we used to say that we are marginalized, we are minorities, there is no development, no. But with the new constitution, there was now an equitable allocation of resources to each and every county of Kenya. And the idea was basically now to take development back to the people. But we will now hear Kenyans say, actually, corruption has been devolved because we don't see this money. Like for us, we've received so far almost upwards of 150 billion.
Including an equalization fund.
Including, I don't know whether the equalization fund is being disbursed. I mean, yeah. So even that equalization fund, one will think the principle, the idea, the brilliant idea of equalization fund was to bring all Kenyans almost at par with each other, equitably. I mean, equality is an ideal. I don't think we'll ever achieve equality in terms of everybody being equal to the other, but equity in terms of just basic, just like we have said earlier. If it's about enjoying certain services, can we at least say reasonably we're enjoying a service from a national organ in wherever I am? So the Kenya at 60 takes me back to reflecting on how far we've come, whether actually we are all comfortable. If you come from, I don't know, Kanyamkago, come from Lokitang, can we say that from our respective wards, we each enjoy a certain level of, if it is security, if it's water, if it's health, if it's education, reasonably. I mean, is it last year or the year before? I saw some very, very deplorable state of education in Kilifi County. Remember when there was flooding and then the kids were just sitting on stones. I mean, that cannot be Kenya in the 21st century. So a lot of these things we'll have to reflect back on what we were promised and what my brother thinks.
Right.
Yeah, I think
Michael.
a few things to highlight here. One is that, well, there has been a certain level of progress in terms of where Kenya is. If you are to look at it 60 years down the road. Oftentimes I compare it with my life. When I was in primary school, we used to walk for 5 kilometers to school and another 5 back home. And that was like...
In other words, you are keeping fit.
Involuntarily. I mean, so right now, access to at least the physical structure of what is called a school, let alone the quality, is a lot easier. When I was in high school, I would carry my school box on my head and walk for another 26 kilometers to the nearest tarmac road. Right now the nearest tarmac road is just about 4 kilometers. So I'm just pointing out this to show some sign of progress. So things have changed a little bit. I mean, a few years ago, Dr. You and me know that we wouldn't be talking the way we are talking here today.
That's true.
You would say a sentence, and of course, the next minute no one knows where you are. Yes. So we have that level of transition from lack of development to a little bit of it. But the reality of the matter is that sometimes the more things change, the more they remain the same. Largely because I think the political leadership has we've not separated individual interests from public interest. And just to go back to what we were talking about earlier, oftentimes we view public office as an opportunity for self-aggrandizement and self-enrichment. The result of that is that the rest then are impoverished. So the poverty that we are talking about is largely because a few that have access and opportunity to state resources do not appreciate the fact that these resources are for everyone, and therefore it is for them an opportunity to, benefit themselves. And I think that is one of the key areas that, even as we talk about Kenya 60 today, I mean, we were talking about corruption. Corruption in all its facets. Sometimes even just the perception that I'm a public officer and therefore you cannot question what I do in itself does a lot of damage to society. So when we talk about transforming the country, we should ideally look at it from that broader perspective, that it's economic transformation, political transformation, social, cultural, so that we all we feel like we belong to this country that we call Kenya. I remember a few years ago, I was traveling to Lodwar. At that time, the road was not yet tarmacked. The tarmac went up to, I think, Kainuk. and
before it was actually tarmac in the 80s, the road from Kitale to Lodo was tarmac.
It was all tarmac.
You could use like 2-3 hours to Lodo. Then, of course, it was worn out. So you must have gone when
the tarmac was not there. and I noticed two things that I think are important in terms of looking back at Kenya at 60. When we reached Kainuk, the perception even of the public officers is that there was that Kenya that you're coming from, and then the rest of us that have no idea whether we are Kenyans or we are. Then another interesting thing I noticed at that time is that when you get to Lokichogyo, I think because of the UN investment around there, from Kakuma, at Kakuma, then you get another line of tarmac.
About 70 kilometers.
Yes. And that then gives you the impression that, probably we have two Kenyas. One that is for those that own the state and have access to the state, and those that are dependent on the benevolence of either individuals or international institutions. And you see the same thing in Garissa, Dadaab, refugee camp and the rest. And I think these are things that we should clearly talk against in terms of moving forward as a country. So even if we talk about 60 years, I would definitely say there are a lot of lost opportunities in these 60 years that we would have taken advantage of.
Bitok, the first time I went to a refugee camp was in 1997. But when I now was doing my doctoral research, because I did my doctoral research on international refugee law. So I went and interviewed the local community in Kakuma. And that actually became the title of my first publication ever. The Mzee told me, I remember it was a paramount chief called Kuchal. And he tells me that, it's better to be a refugee than a Turkana in Kakuma. I'll share with you my write-up on that. It's published by a Canadian journal. And I asked him, why do you say this, Mzee? He said, look, these foreigners who are refugees, they came here, they brought with them the entire world, the UN, the entire UN. So you have UNHCR, World Food Program, Red Cross, and even the government of Kenya actually allocated them land and ensured that there's security. But as the Turkana, for the longest time, we have been in this very insecure location. You don't see the UN, you don't see the international community, you don't see our own government actually being concerned about our safety. But because foreigners have come, then there's a whole concern about safety. There's water is being drilled, food is being distributed. You can see hospitals, and you can see some level of organization. So so I decided to put these ideas down into an article, which is published. Now, in fact, you can even Google it. You can get it online. It's called "Better to be a refugee than a Turkana."
I was doing some research in East Pokot at that time, and we had a discussion with the local communities around there, and just to try and gauge their perception of what government is to them, and
actually got it.
So we were asking these people. So where do you get where does your child go to school? The school is actually funded by World Vision. Where do you get medical services? World Vision. Where do you get your water from? World Vision. So government to them, if you are to look at government in terms of service provision, then it is this NGO that is more of a government to them than government. So if you tell this person that I'm the local area chief and the government has given this condition for you to do X, Y, Z, then this guy will be surprised and looking at you like, well, so who are you in my life? Because I don't interact with you in any way in terms of service provision. So I think...
Okay. All right. So let's get straight into the convention of the day. Abbas Njuguna CJ rides a fleet of 20 million plus machines, but in Kenya, there are areas in makeshift courts which operates only once a month. Suspect police and prison officers and other court officials sit under trees when the court is in session. Okay, Gerald Bitok, my city of Nairobi crime scene to be on another level. Professor Ekuru's experience is very unfortunate indeed that even the police couldn't help him get back his laptop. Such incidents will increase in every city in Kenya if between the rich and the poor, if the gap between the rich and the poor is not reduced drastically. Even after living half a century in Netherlands, where such incidents are next to impossible, I can't leave my laptop in my car. I'm out of Nairobi, but Nairobi will never get out of me. Inaonekana maisha ya Nairobi bado ni yale yale. So jamaa kwa Netherlands lakini anasikia kama kwa Kanairo. Laptop hizi. Good to see you, Kipkemoi. Good morning. Well, it's very good to see you, Kipkemoi Maina. Good to see you. Ligma Belize, good morning. John Gerald, good morning, John. All day from Canada, good to see you this morning. It's a pleasure to have you. David Oyola, tuned in from Nyali for a short holiday. Oyola, naendo unasema uchumi ni mbaya. Mtu uko sahi wakati ukambi uko Nyali holiday.
Holiday?
Imagine. Analia pia the economy.
Mwambia atume tiketi.
Yeah, tumeka kitu.
Hata kama ni SGR.
Oyola bwana, send something Omera. Send something. Kipkemoi, good to see you. Good morning. Kabonsa tuned in from Kampala, Uganda. I'm shocked since yesterday. I'm amazed. People are working with a lot of money. Up in the millions on their hand. I was asking my friend, jaribu hivi Kenya, mkono itaenda na pesa. Okay. But you need to clarify, is it 1 million millions in Ugandan money or Kenyan shillings? Because when you convert the million from Uganda, it's 200 shillings in Kenya. It's all big. All right, let's get straight into the conversation of the day, and of course, it's about the finance bill. So, Third Way Alliance has done a memo on the finance bill. Dr.Ekuru Aukot will help us get through it. But before that, I would want to get the thoughts of Michael on the finance bill, because the president yesterday said this thing must pass whether we get me or ndekni. So clearly, then we have to read it and get to understand the consequences of it. So, Michael, maybe you can give us your views even before you get to the memo, because I'm sure that will take some time. You can give us your thoughts on the finance bill.
Thanks, Gerald. Tax, I always say tax is mandatory. I think that is a common cliche that we all know about. And tax serves 4 purposes: raising revenue, redistribution of resources, representation, and of course, when you look at these first 3, and you look at the finance bill, you see a sense of all these 3, cutting across. A lot of the areas that raising revenue, redistribution, and representation. Of course, I'll mention the 4th one slightly later. Representation, if you look at representation, one is that public participation needs to be part and parcel of taxation. In other words, you can't presume to tax me without involving me, because in any case, it is me that is producing, and you tax my production, whether it is in terms of employment or business or whatever way that I get those resources. And that is the purpose entirely why actually the finance bill has to go through Parliament. The presumption we make is that members of Parliament will be sufficiently representative enough of the interest of the people. And therefore, people will be technically be represented there. But I think one good thing that our Constitution has also done is that it has also made it a requirement that even before Parliament debates the finance bill, in particular in this case, it has to consult with the people, And that's why we have been having these public participation forums, across the country, including at a national level. Part of it could be tangential to the actual changes that we are talking about. And that's why I get worried when we say that the bill will pass yes, because constitutionally, and even in terms of the basis of taxation itself, representation, you wouldn't want to tax people by force, unless we are saying, if you go to the colonial history of Kenya, at that time, then taxation would have been forceful. But because we were not a free country. But now that we are talking about Kenya at 60, I think it is only fair that we go through this. In terms of raising revenue, when you talk about taxation, you see, government has no money. Government is us. the people that are sitting in those offices have no money. So for government to run, that money has to come from us. And the history of taxation also qualifies that, you see. The origin of taxation itself, if you look at, for example, the Greek city-states and how they introduced taxation, the basis of it was that there were certain common services, there were certain common benefits that people would derive from establishing a state. And because the state does not have the resources to finance these services, the people would then surrender part of their property, to the state or to this sovereign entity, let me call it so, so that they would use these resources to then provide these services. And these services, technically, if you are to summarize this in one sentence, is basically just security of life and security of property. But of course, when we talk about security of life, we are talking about life in a much broader context, in the sense that it is not just a policeman standing outside my house to ensure that I'm safe, but it is also about ensuring that I don't die of hunger, which means I have food in my house. I can get medical services, I can get education, all those services that we're talking about. So the finance bill as it is, I think we should talk about the finance bill from the context that it is a proposal that has been made to the Kenyan people. And the Kenyan people will then make a decision on whether this finance bill will pass or not. And not the other way around, that we say that we will pass it, whether we like it or not. On the question of redistribution, I think this is where certain aspects of the finance bill become important. I will highlight later, is that the government exists to ensure that everyone benefits from collective, or what I would call commonwealth. That this wealth that we have put together, all of us then have an opportunity to benefit from it. But of course, we also recognize that because we are operating in a capitalist society, certain people, we have the opportunity to make our own money, produce, and then retain it for ourselves. But what that then creates is that there isn't, without the intervention of government, there isn't a mechanism of everyone else that may not have the opportunity to produce as much as the others then benefit from this commonwealth. And that is where taxation then comes in to redistribute these resources, from those that have, I wouldn't want to say more than enough, because, money can never be enough. But for those that have a lot, redistribute it to those that have less. I mean, if you are to look at it in a comparative perspective, Daktari was talking about, poverty. We have in this society people that have the 3 meals a day. Others have more than the 3 meals a day. Another person has basically nothing to eat. So it is the responsibility of government to ensure that those that have more than they need, they're able to cushion those that don't have, And that's where, for instance, when you talk about the housing levy, of course, the perception that it creates is that the government will use this to provide housing to those that don't have. But the challenge that comes with it is that then when you want to make it a compulsory contribution, you see, if I'm contributing to something, I would want to benefit from it, and I would want to see a route to that benefit, however long it takes. But if I don't see that route to that benefit, and then it becomes a situation where my contribution is directly going to benefit someone else and not myself, then we have to go back to the broader discussion of redistribution. Redistribution is not, you see, when we talk about redistribution, it is not that I deprive another person so that someone else can get. Redistribution means that those that have more than they actually need, those resources can then be pooled, and then collectively benefit the rest. But I think the finance bill, particularly with the housing levy, has created a perception that it is taking from some and giving to others, And by taking from some, you are actually depriving these people of what is rightfully theirs for the benefit of others. And two, that there isn't a sense of willingness. In other words, can I choose
not to?
And if I cannot choose, if I don't have the option of a choice, then it must be my own benefit. I must only contribute so that I get my house. I can't contribute so that someone else gets that house. So when you look at this broad, these three areas of how we look at taxation, then the finance bill then presents us with an opportunity to begin to tick each of these. Are we meeting these basic principles of taxation in terms of representation? Am I part and parcel of this process? In terms of redistribution, is it fair redistribution? Because if you are creating the impression that the redistribution process is unfair, then people will definitely resist. Raising revenue, of course, we have to contribute to our government, because government doesn't have money. Government gets money from taxes. Of course, there are other sources of like borrowing, but even if you borrow, you still have to pay, and you have to use your taxes to pay whatever you borrowed. So in a nutshell, I think I would want to look at the finance bill from that context. Aside from the more specific aspects, of the finance bill, just to point out a few, the finance bill, and I want to focus on the ones that have a direct impact on the citizens, the ordinary citizens, you and me. The finance bill proposes to increase VAT on petroleum products. Technically, you know what that means. Almost everything depends on energy. You need energy to produce. So an increase from 8% to 16% will significantly lead to an increase in cost of living because of increased cost of production, let alone even the cost of fuel itself at the petrol station, So I think that is something that has to be really looked at in the context of cushioning the common mwananchi, cushioning the hustler, so that people don't suffer any further damage more than it is today. In addition to that, the finance bill has also proposed an increase in withholding tax. I'm just picking a few that I think are important in this case. On digital services, young Kenyans are very creative with social media, and this has become a source of employment for a lot of people, And by taxing it, then we don't want to say that people should not pay tax. As long as you earn an income, you should be able to pay tax. But tax, you see, a tax rate, in other words, if you put a percentage on the amount of tax that you are levying on an income, you also have to look at, are you necessarily going to get more money by introducing that tax, or you are actually going to lose more money? And because we are dealing with very creative young people, I think we need to study it a little further and clearly understand whether it will lead to increased revenue or it may actually lead to reduced revenue. Let me give an example. In the last Finance Act, tax was increased on telephone and money transfer services. The excise duty on telephone and money transfer services was increased to 20%. I think from 15 or 12.5 or thereabouts. The result of it is that Kenya Revenue Authority actually collected far less. When the tax rate was lower, they collected more than when the tax rate is actually high. Exactly, because you see, even though we have to pay tax is not easy to pay. Tax is painful because it's actually taking away your money. So if the tax increases the amount of money that you actually lose, that you're actually not retaining for yourself, then people have a tendency to change their consumption behavior. Either by reducing the amount of the amount that they spend on a particular area that is overtaxed, or creating a parallel economy, a parallel economy that the state cannot then control. And that is my fear with, the digital services tax, because then we may end up creating a parallel, informal, I wouldn't want to say illegal, because sometimes it also depends on the laws that we have. Without sufficient legal provisions on how to control it, then it becomes a problem. So we have to look at these tax provisions from that perspective. That are you actually going to raise more revenue by introducing a tax, or you're actually going to lose, or you are not actually not going to get any more money. You may just get the same amount of money. The flip side of it is that you also have to look at the administrative costs. You see, collecting tax is not like the money is lying somewhere, you just go and pick it. It comes with costs. So if the administrative cost of collecting that tax
is more than
the tax that you're actually collecting, then it makes no sense to focus on that tax. I think for now I would want to stop at that point. Of course, I'll highlight a few other things later.
Okay, all right. Daktari, straight to you.
So we did a memo to Parliament as a party, and I was assisted in developing this memo by 3 other friends. One is Ashish Chada, who is our finance expert, but also our budget coordinator within Third Way. Iqbal Rai, who is a businessman, and our chairman, CPA, Miruru Waweru, and myself. So in our memo, we have highlighted a few things that I really want to discuss with tacklers today. The first issue that we picked is the whole idea around efficiency and equity in any taxation regime. And our summation is that the bill 2023 is inefficient and is not equitable. Like Michael has said, paying taxes can be very painful to any citizen. And therefore, there is a requirement that in any tax regime, you must ensure there is efficiency and equity. Now, when you look at the Finance Bill 2023, it places a lot of pressure on efficiency. That is to say, compliance has to be very easy for you to be able to pay taxes. But secondly, on equity, also places a lot of pressure on the equity. That is to say that the systems are required to be fair and equal to everyone. Now, relating to efficiency, the bill exerts pressure on that idea of efficiency. For instance, the bill proposes that a person that receives rental income on behalf of the owner of a premise, shall be required to deduct withholding tax and remit that tax within 24 hours. Can you imagine that? That's what the bill says. That if I'm in charge, say I'm a caretaker of your property, once I receive rent, I deduct withholding tax and I've submitted within 24 hours. I mean, clearly, 24 hours does not really assist government at all in collecting taxes, but it places a huge burden on the agent appointed. Is this proposal practical, and what mischief does it really want to cure? Even in this day and age, I mean, surely within 24 hours, even the government systems sometimes don't operate. So that's on efficiency, just to keep an example. So I think that provision really needs to be revised by the parliament. The second element relates to equity. In our reading of the bill, we feel that the bill is not equitable on account of a number of reasons. Just to mention a few. For example, when the bill proposes to amend Section 4 of the Income Tax Act, the bill will allow foreign exchange losses to be carried forward for a limited period of 3 years. That's what it says. These losses are as a result of a decision business makes, but a macroeconomic forces. So that is the Section 4 of the Income Tax Act. By also amending the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act, because that's what the bill says, to require an appellant in a case to deposit 20% of the disputed tax amount prior to the case being heard, are not having the same requirement being reciprocated for Kenya Revenue Authority. So here the bill is actually being punitive. That if there is a dispute on tax, I must deposit 20%, even before the case is decided. But the same duty is not bestowed upon KRA. So it's not equitable to me, the taxpayer. The other example, Bitok, is the bill seeks to amend Section 5(4) of the Income Tax Act. The bill discriminates between employees working in the public sector and those working in the private sector, because the amendment exempts taxation of a reimbursement of an expenditure incurred for the purposes of performing official duties by a public officer. But not the same is not extended to people in the private sector. So the bill here is discriminative. Now, in summary, therefore, to say that the bill does not meet the most important characteristics of a good tax system. Yeah? And GOK, in my view, really should consider amending the relevant sections. So because it has to be efficient, it has to be equitable. That is what a good tax system obtains or always seeks. Because we asked ourselves the question, we asked Parliament is it not unconstitutional to presume that a taxpayer is guilty before the courts dispense with tax disputes? When you impose, for example, a 20% on me, you've already adjudged me guilty. It's not even in tandem with Article 49, Article 50 of the Constitution on fair trial. Now, that is one element we have picked from the bill generally, and I hope tacklers will read. The other thing we picked from the bill is that this bill is very injurious to the manufacturing sector in this country. Okay? Let's do some comparison, Bitok. So if we were to draw from successful economies, many of the Southeast Asian countries, for example, they recognize the importance of manufacturing sector towards the development of any economy. Now, given the importance of the manufacturing sector to the economy, just an example in our own context, the Kibaki administration, for example, was very keen on supporting the sector, manufacturing sector. Now, the manufacturing sector has been reeling under economic pressure, especially foreign currency challenges, duty waiver on unfinished goods imported, counterfeit goods, and huge increases in cost of electricity and fuel that all have a negative impact on manufacturing. I don't even think we can overemphasize this. Any increase on fuel levy, electricity, will definitely drive the cost of living up, and therefore the manufacturing sector will suffer. So various pronouncements in the bill, Bitok, are particularly deleterious to the manufacturing sector. For example, by taking away the exemption applicable on restriction to 30% of interest deductibility from taxable income on loans received from a non-resident, that already affects manufacturing sector. Number two, the increase in the advance tax on vehicles. A lot of people are focusing on housing levy, but there's an increased tax on vehicles will have a huge impact on transport. Yeah, so vehicle owners really need to read this bill carefully. It's not just about the housing levy. Actually, I think the housing levy fund discussion is diversionary. There are many, many things in this bill that people are not looking into. Yeah. Secondly, also
The story on that advance tax on.
You see, it's like when you own a vehicle now, you have to pay certain. In fact, they have even described vans, canters, and all that. So you have to pay this money in advance, even before you could accrue any benefit from it.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Just to chip in a bit. The proposal in that section, the reality is that the tax has always been there. But now the bill is proposing to increase it, in certain cases by double. Yeah. So for example, for commercial vehicles, the advance tax is based on the tonnage of the vehicle. And now that has been increased by double per ton. So if you have like a 1 ton pickup, if you are previously paying 1,500 per ton, it will now be required that you pay 3,000 per ton. Now, the cumulative effect of that is that commercial vehicles that were paying, for example, an advance tax of 7,500 every year are now going to pay about 16,800 every year. The same applies to passenger vehicles, So if you have a taxi, for instance, if you have a van that carries passengers, previously they were supposed to be paying, I think, 60 shillings per seat, or I think 2,500 per year, whichever is higher. There's a way it's calculated, and now that has been increased to 100 per seat, or I think 5,000 per year, depending on which one is. But it depends on the capacity of the vehicle that you're talking about. So if you have, for instance, a 14-seater matatu, I think now the tax will go up to about 16,000 and a few hundreds per year. So it has a huge impact on vehicle owners, to an extent that, of course, definitely that cost will not be borne by the vehicle owner. That cost will be borne by pass it over to the consumers, and you are just accumulating, additional cost of living on ordinary citizens.
So, let me now go to one of the thorny issues that people have been discussing, and we have made some observations as a party. This is the question of the low-cost housing levy. You see, the proposed 3% housing levy, in our view, is completely misguided. And the fact that this proposal targets to force employees to part with 3% of their gross revenue is quite insensitive, given that most Kenyans earn meager salaries and are unable to meet their basic life needs. So imagine by the time I do a budget of, say, 50,000 in my house, but you're telling me from that salary of 50,000, which I've already budgeted, kuna rent, kuna shopping, kuna nini, maybe kuna school fees, medical and whatever, you're telling me to part with 3% of that gross to begin with. That's not fair at all. So, if indeed, for example, the levy is intended to provide cheap houses and reduce the number of urban population living in slums, the government, in our view, should look for an alternative financing method, but not from salaries, meager salaries of public servants. I mean, pick, for example, say a cop. What is the salary of a cop? If you look at the payslip, say, of a police officer, they'll be lucky if they get even a net of 30,000 or 20,000 per month. Now you're telling that guy, part with 3% of your gross. That's before even taxation. Yeah, gross. It's gross. So, in our view, that we asked in our memorandum that the government must justify why they believe that the employed individuals should bear the responsibility of building houses for others. You see, some of these employees are comfortable on rental houses. Others are servicing mortgages, while others are not interested in owning houses in the urban areas. People have built homes in the village, in the rural areas, and that's in their retirement plan. They plan to retire in their rural locations. But now you're telling them you must now build this house in the urban areas. So you see, if you look at the president and his lieutenants, they have made some public pronouncements that contributions will not allocate houses, will have an option of withdrawing their savings after 7 years. That's what they have said. Okay? The question we pose is this: are there guaranteed returns? That answer that question is not being answered in the bill. There are no guaranteed returns. What is the rate of interest that the savings will earn during that period? We've not been told that. Secondly, Bitok, and related to that, Michael, if it's an investment, why are you forcing me? Because the moment you make it law, then you are calling in on the law enforcement agencies to enforce that law, meaning you are going to force people actually to contribute. But, who told them that I want a house? If I'm comfortable in my Mbabati house, what is their problem? Yeah? I've got other needs. And see, for us, we have asked this question further. We will further wish to know whether the government will manage to build low-cost houses in all counties. This is a question that is emerging. Is it the focus only in urban areas? What are the urban areas in Kenya? Yeah? So, what will happen to a contributor, say in Mandera, who needs a house in Mandera, but the government fails to provide such houses there? Or in Turkana, or in Kwale, or in Lamu? Will he or she come to live in Nairobi, Kisumu, or Mombasa? Those are the urban areas. These are fundamental questions that the bill is not answering. So, in summary, on this issue of levy, housing levy, the low-cost house concept, in my view, on our view, must be discarded at the earliest opportunity. For all intents and purposes, is a scam. And honestly, as all the hallmarks of a pyramid, bent on defrauding hardworking Kenyans. This is just a pyramid, Bitok. Remember, the issue around housing is not new. Remember when Margaret Wanjiru was the minister for housing back in the days? Alianza na Madaraka, estate nini. Then we saw the people actually who got allocated those houses. Kibra has been another, Langata has been another scandal. So I think for me, government should really go slow on this. Let me talk. Let me now walk you guys through. I mean, the other important element for us that we have picked is that we feel that the bill goes against the Constitution of Kenya 2010 in a number of reasons. For example, let's look at Article 201 of the Constitution of Kenya. And it requires, and I'm quoting it earlier, that there shall be openness and accountability, including public participation in financial matters. That's what the Constitution requires. 3.2, the public finance system shall promote an equitable society. And in particular, the burden of taxation shall be shared fairly. That's what the Constitution says. Revenue raised nationally shall be shared equitably among national and county governments. And number 3, expenditure shall promote the equitable development of the country, including by making special provision for marginalized groups and areas. Now, the burdens and benefits of the use of resource and public borrowing shall be shared equitably between present and future generations. Public money shall be used in a prudent and responsible way. Financial management shall be responsible, and fiscal reporting shall be clean. Now, if you look at Article 209, Article 5 of the Constitution, it requires that taxation and other revenue-raising powers of a county shall not be exercised in a way that prejudices national economic policies. Okay? So it's our view that the bill prejudices the economic activities of the country and is counterproductive. And we have looked at the huge revenue increases that this bill is actually bringing. And in fact, we have done a comparison. If you look at, for example, financial year 2020-2021, with financial year 2021-2022, ordinary revenue was 1.56 trillion. Now it's going up. It's gone up by 1.9 trillion. Let's go back. Let's look at 2023-2024. It's gone up by 2.5 trillion. To 2014-2015, 2.8 trillion. You know, this is very technical. But in conclusion, this is what we have said in our bill. To ensure that the bill becomes equitable, efficient, more pro-economic development, and in line with the Constitution of Kenya 2010, Section 2 provides specific items that should be amended. Now, let me discuss those specific items, and I think I would like to hear what Michael thinks about this. Now, we have made proposal for specific amendments that are unconstitutional and unfair. The first one is Section 4A of the Income Tax Act. And this relates to foreign exchange losses being deferred. Okay? Now, the proposal in the bill is this, that the finance bill now proposes that non-deductible foreign exchange losses can only be carried forward for a maximum of 3 years. Okay? Within those 3 years, foreign exchange losses will only be deductible in the financial year where the company's interest does not exceed the restriction threshold of 30%. Yeah, that's the proposal in the bill. Now, what is our view as a party? We feel that this proposal is unfair to taxpayers because, one, foreign exchange losses are caused by macroeconomic factors, which are beyond the taxpayer's control. Number two, additionally, this proposal will impose a huge administrative burden on the part of taxpayers, as companies will need to track foreign exchange losses per year of income as they get realized. So that amendment of Section 4A of the Income Tax Act really needs to be revisited in the context of foreign exchange losses being deferred. Secondly, Section 16 of the Income Tax Act relating to interest restrictions. This is what the bill says. You see, if you compare it with the previous Finance Act, it had introduced an interest cost restriction of 30%. Okay? However, the following two categories of manufacturing companies are exempted from interest restriction. Number one, companies engaged in manufacturing whose cumulative interest investment in the preceding 5 years from January 2023 was at Kenya shillings 5 billion. Number two, companies engaging in manufacturing whose cumulative investment was at Kenya shillings 5 billion, provided that the investment shall have made outside Nairobi City, County, and Mombasa County. So interest incurred from loans from residents will no longer be subject to interest restrictions. The Finance Bill 2023 further proposes to take away the exemptions applicable to manufacturing companies. Now, we feel this is very punitive. Now, what is our proposal? We feel that the manufacturing companies are capital intensive, and most of these investments were made into country in part due to such exemption. So manufacturing companies are further impacted by the huge increase in cost of inputs like electricity and fuel. So it's going to be a very huge hit on the manufacturing sector. Not only this, but the GOK has also exempted duties on finished products, okay? Further reducing margins available for manufacturing. So this proposal will most likely be the final nail in the coffin for manufacturing companies. So we feel that section really needs to be revised. Then there is Section 18A of the Income Tax Act. And this one relates to qualifying intellectual property income. Okay? Now, the bill proposes to bring a preferential tax rate for qualifying intellectual property. It's our view, when proposing such an aggressive bill, one will expect thoroughness and attention to detail. Okay? There is no mention of the preferential tax rate. Furthermore, there is no link back to Section 3 of the Income Tax Act itself. Let's go to withholding tax on rental income collected by agents. I mean, we've already spoken about this. So the bill proposes that a person who receives rental income on behalf of the owner of a premise shall deduct tax from that, provided that only a person appointed by the commissioner in writing for that purpose may deduct tax under this section. They will be required to remit the tax within 24 hours after the deduction. Now, our view as a party is that this compliance is a burden, as it requires the agent to remit the tax within 24 hours after making the deduction. This places an impractical compliance burden on the taxpayer, which is contrary to the design of a fair tax code, which should not impose punitive compliance burdens on taxpayers. Now, let's look at the advanced tax applicable to vans, pickups, trucks, prime movers, trailers, lorries, saloons, station wagons, minibuses, and buses. That's the advanced tax on all those motor vehicles. So what does the bill propose? The bill proposes to increase the advanced tax to 3,000 from Kenya shillings 1,500 per ton of load capacity per year, or Kenya shillings 5,000 from Kenya shillings 2,400, whichever is higher. You see, this is punishing business people. So it's our proposal that with the transport sector already reeling under the high cost of fuel, this will have a negative impact of cost of doing business from a cash flow perspective. Okay? It should be noted that this advanced tax is recovered at the end of the year against corporate tax, and therefore limiting the negative ramifications. Now, Bitok, there is another impact this bill has on another law. A lot of Kenyans now need to read these laws. There is the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act.
That bit on commercial vehicles is interesting because if you link the bill also proposes to restructure the turnover tax. And I think notably is that there are two things here. One is that the bill reduces the higher threshold on turnover tax, and then increases. I think the essence is that they want to expand the tax base, so bring in more people into the tax bracket. So, for example, previously businesses were not required to remit turnover tax if it was less than a million. Now that has been reduced to 500,000. Now, technically, if you calculate 500,000, it means any business that is giving you approximately maybe 45, 46,000 every month. It means that a lot of what we are calling small-scale enterprises, that also includes even the transport sector, will now be required to remit turnover tax.
Yes.
And that is in addition to the advanced tax that we are talking about. So if you bring in the issue of multiple taxation, you see, previously because of the higher threshold on turnover tax, a lot of these small-scale businesses were not required to remit turnover tax. So it then gives the impression that, you see, a single business, and this is also in addition to county levies, will be paying a lot of taxes just by virtue of reducing that threshold from 1 million to 500,000. And secondly is that if you reduce the threshold, it also technically means that businesses that were not previously paying corporate income tax, will now be subject to payment of corporate income tax, because previously they were just paying turnover tax. Turnover tax is based on how much money you are selling. So it's not even profit. So if you sell to a certain amount, then you pay turnover tax. It's kind of presumptive tax. It presumes that probably you are going to make a profit on whether you make it or not. Doesn't matter. Now, by reducing the threshold to a much lower level, it means that businesses will now be paying corporate income tax. Now, I think the catch is that once you get into the bracket of corporate income tax, your tax rate increases to 35%. So you'll be paying much more. The only difference is that you are now paying it on profits. So you have to calculate your profits and then pay corporate income tax on your profits. It also means that now you have to invest on increased administrative costs, because you need an accountant to do for you your books, so that you can establish whether you have a profit or not. So the pressure, and I think this is where the common mwananchi then has to be very careful about this bill, because we are now talking about businesses that were previously classified as small-scale enterprises, that are now being treated as corporate entities that are liable to pay corporate income tax. I think I just wanted to add that point too.
Okay. Yeah. So, let me rush quickly, because this bill has an impact on a number of laws, which actually impact on Kenyans. The other law that this bill impacts is what you call the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act. And this is in relation to payment security equivalent of 20% of disputed taxes. Yeah. So what the bill is saying is that the bill proposes to amend Tax Appeals Tribunal Act 2013 by introducing a requirement for taxpayers to deposit with the commissioner or KRA 20% of the tax in dispute or security before they file an appeal to the High Court against a decision of the Tax Appeals Tribunal. You see? So the requirement to pay 20% of the disputed tax will not apply where the commissioner is the one appealing to the High Court. So it is targeting you, the person who is disputing. So once the High Court has ruled in favor of the taxpayer, the commissioner is required to refund the monies deposited within 30 days after the determination of the court. So now our feeling is this, our proposal is this, that this is an unfair and unconstitutional at various levels. Number one, this proposal presumes that a taxpayer is guilty until proven innocent.
Not the other way around.
Not the other way around. So it even goes against the Constitution. Yeah? Number two, how much of VAT refunds are still payable by KRA? Even today as we speak, you know, how much actually has KRA paid in terms of refund? VAT refunds. KRA hardly. So this law actually is, you know, is punishing the taxpayer more. And it's not asking the same question. You, KRA, we've been paying VAT. How much have you refunded? To date, we don't know. Number three, Bitok, could it be that 20% is deposited and never repaid? It's a possibility. If KRA is not able to refund VAT today, then you're asking me to pay 20% deposit. What's the guarantee that I'll get back my money? So that's a very unclear point. So we have also asked the question, why will the law only be applicable to a taxpayer and not the KRA? You know? So it's an unfair law. In our view, this is against the equitable principle of taxation. Our proposal is that the requirement to put aside 20% should be withdrawn in its entirety. So that's on the... yes, should apply both sides, at the very least. So that's on the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act. And I hope tacklers will now find these laws and read them carefully. The other law that's being impacted by this bill is the Tax Procedures Act, especially Section 23A relating to electronic tax records. Okay? Now, what does the bill propose, the 2023 bill propose? It proposes to introduce Section 23A to empower the commissioner to establish an electronic tax system for issuing tax invoices and keeping records of stocks. That's the proposal. Our view is this. This is a welcome move, and it is felt that it should be expanded to include the informal sector of the economy. So we are not only just saying the bill is entirely, but in as far as this is concerned, I think it's a good idea. Section 37 of the Tax Procedures Act.
Sorry, let me also just
okay.
chip in a little bit on that. I think this is one of the positive moves that I think the bill proposes for two reasons. One, previously, Kenya Revenue Authority required businesses to purchase, the physical ETR machines, which were fairly expensive. What this proposal then does is that it reduces the cost of doing business by then allowing businesses to use e-tax registers. So it's more of an online system that is a lot easier for businesses to deal with. Two, and this has to do with international perspectives in terms of managing domestic taxes. We have multinational corporations that operate in Kenya. And one of the challenges that Kenya Revenue Authority has always, and many developing countries have, is the problem of misinvoicing. You invoice a cost that is actually not a cost, because if it is a cost, then it will impact on your profit, and therefore your profit reduces, and therefore you pay less tax. Yeah. Now, what this proposal then helps to achieve is that it will reduce the chances of misinvoicing by multinational corporations, and therefore also reduce the opportunities for transfer pricing, where, for instance, you have corporations operating in Kenya, declaring losses in Kenya, have subsidiaries elsewhere, in most cases in low tax jurisdictions, declaring profits in the low tax jurisdictions, but they are actually making their money in Kenya. Now, linked to that is a proposal that has also been put in the bill that now requires corporations to declare profits on branches. In essence, what it is proposing is to tax branches. So if you have a multinational corporation with a branch in Kenya, then you'll tax that branch, notwithstanding the global business. So if you have a subsidiary or you have a branch in Kenya, that branch will be treated as an independent tax entity rather than a subsidiary of a multinational corporation that is then taxed elsewhere. And I think the beauty of it is that it then will reduce the chances of these multinational corporations using this tax loophole that we have always had to transfer their profits to jurisdictions that they actually don't make their money there. I remember in the last discussion we had here, I gave the example of Mauritius, for instance. You have a lot of multinational corporations that are registered in Mauritius, but they are doing their business in Kenya. They declare losses in Kenya, but declare profits in Mauritius, but they actually make their money in Kenya. The loophole that they were using at that time is the opportunity to misinvoice, because when you are using physical invoices, it becomes a lot easier for you to cheat on it. So what this bill then now requires is that you cannot claim a tax deductible expenditure if that expenditure is not recorded in the e-invoice. In other words, it must be known, it must be declared that is a tax deductible expenditure. So I think this is a fairly good proposal. It may look like it may discourage foreign investment, and I think what the bill has done is that for now, the tax rate for branches for foreign investors has been slightly reduced to 30%, and not the 35% for normal corporate income tax. So that at least for the time being, it's not much of a burden to the branches and the subsidiaries of these corporations. But I think moving forward, we need to begin taxing corporations where they make their money. So if you make your money in Kenya, whether you are registered in the Cayman Islands or Panama or wherever it is, you make your money in Kenya, we tax you in Kenya. Whether you are a subsidiary of a multinational corporation or just a branch of a multinational corporation, as long as you make your money in Kenya, then we tax you in Kenya. And I think that's what this bill proposes to do.
So the other section that's relevant relating to the Tax Procedures Act, Bitok, is Section 37. And this one relates to relief because of doubt or difficulty in recovery of tax. Yeah. So the proposal is that to delete Section 37 that provides that where recovery of taxes is deemed to be impossible or at a great expense to the commissioner upon approval by the cabinet secretary, can abandon the recovery of that tax. Our feeling is that this could be very burdensome for KRA, and in some instances, the cost of recovery of this tax could be far outweigh the revenue itself. Then there is Section 40 of the Tax Procedures Act. This one relates to security on property for unpaid tax. Security on property for unpaid tax. So the bill proposes to amend Section 40 of the TPA to delete the commissioner's obligation to notify a taxpayer of the notification to the registrar to register a security for unpaid tax. So it amends the section to provide that the registrar of lands shall notify the taxpayer within 14 days after the registration of the security of unpaid taxes. Now, what is our view as a party? We think that this amendment poses a risk to the rights of taxpayers as it removes the requirement for the commissioner to notify the taxpayer of the intention to register security against their property. Now, as a result, taxpayers will not be able to challenge the decision of the commissioner before the security is registered. Okay? Then there's Section 42A, relating to the same Tax Procedures Act. Section 42A, currently, this is according to the 2023 bill, the commissioner may appoint to withhold 2% of the taxable value on purchasing taxable supplies on the time of paying for the supplies. Now, the amounts withheld are paid by the 20th of the month. 20th of the month, following the month in which the deduction is made. Now, however, the withholding tax does not apply to the taxable value of zero-rated supplies, and unregistered manufacturers whose value of investment in the preceding 3 years from the commencement of this act is at least 3 million. And Mike can explain more on that from a technical point of view. Now, the payment will now need to be made within 3 days of withholding the payment. Yes. So the bill proposes to tax away the exemption applicable to manufacturers. Now, our proposal is this. Another big cash flow impact to manufacturers that are already reeling under the new regulations. We propose that the current exemption for manufacturers should be left in place in order to ensure that their cash flow is protected. Again, even though if you have to develop this country's economy, we cannot undermine manufacturing. And this is what the bill is saying. Now, there is another section that's very interesting, Bitok. This is section 59A. And this one relates to data management and reporting system. Yeah? I hope tacklers will now read the law keenly. Tutafundisha hao sheria leo. Now, the bill proposes to introduce section 59A, which provides for the establishment of a data management and reporting system for the submission of electronic documents. Okay? The system allows for the submission of electronic documents relating to transactional data from persons selected and notified by the commissioner. The data include payments made by a person in ordinary course of business, lump sum payments in respect of a royalty, or such other commercial or financial transaction as may be designated by the commissioner. That's what the bill says. Now, we feel this is a welcome move to bring into the tax bracket those who are avoiding tax. We think this is a good move. Now, our proposal, however, is this, that KRA must include a data management and reporting system that can be incorporated into the M-Pesa to particularly target those within the informal sector. Exactly. Yeah. Then there is section 84A. I'm about to finish. This one relates to tax shortfall penalty. Yeah. Tacklers lazima musome hii sheria. Otherwise msianza kulialia in the next 1 year ati amukuambiwa. Now, the bill proposes to increase the amount of the tax shortfall penalty to double the amount of tax from the current 75%. Yeah? The current 75%, it proposes to double that.
So that will be 150%.
Yeah. So our feel is that actually this is welcome, but it should not be applicable to those cases where the tax shortfall is as a result of differing interpretation of the tax regulations. Okay? Then there is the VAT amendments. VAT Act amendments in this bill. For example, Section 5, which relates to increased VAT on petroleum products. Okay? The bill proposes to delete Section 5 of the VAT Act that provides for the application of the reduced VAT rate of 80% on goods listed in the first schedule, Schedule B, Part 1. Now, it's our view, this will increase VAT rate on petroleum products to 16% and will further push up the cost of fuel, which will consequently spike the general cost of living. This amendment, in our view, should be discarded. Now, then there is the impact of this bill on the Excise Duty Act. Excise Duty Act. For example, tariff 1902, which relates to pasture excise duty. So the bill proposes to tax both locally and imported pasta. Okay. Another big impact in our view, another big impact item for local manufacturers. The excise duty should only be levied on imported pasta. In fact, to improve tax revenue, it is proposed that National Treasury consider increasing the excise duty from the current 20% to 30%. Then there is tariff 17.04, which relates to locally produced sugar confectionery, which is now subject to excise duty. Now, the bill proposes to include excise duty on both locally manufactured and imported sugar confectionery products at the rate of Kenya shillings 36.75 per kg. Yeah? Currently, this is levied only on imported products. Now, it is our proposal, once again, we know that this bill is punitive towards manufacturers. Yes. Then there is excise duty on services. The bill proposes to increase excise duty on betting from 7.5 to 20%. It also proposes to increase excise duty on gaming from 7.5 to 20%. It also proposes to increase excise duty on price competition from 7.5 to 20%. And it also proposes to increase excise duty on lottery from 7.5 to 20%. Now, this is our proposal, Bitok, that given the harmful nature of these activities, one wonders why the overall impact of tax on fuel and vehicles is 100% on those subsidy excise duty, just 7.5 or 20% as proposed. It is the view that this can be levied at 100%. Okay. Now there is miscellaneous. Let me go to the employment taxes. And I hope, Bitok, you will share this. You will share this memorandum with the tacklers online. Now, on employment taxes, we looked at paragraph 4 of the Income Tax Act, which relates to reimbursement of expenses incurred by public officers for the purpose of performing official duties. Now, the bill seeks to amend the Income Tax Act by introducing a new paragraph 5.4, paragraph 5, subarticle 4 or subsection 4, to provide that any amount paid or granted to a public officer to reimburse an expenditure incurred for the purpose of performing official duties shall not be taxable on the public officer, notwithstanding the ownership or control of any assets purchased. Now, this is our proposal. This seems like far the most discriminatory provision of the bill. The employees in the private sector should be taxed for a similar expenditure, whereas employees in the public sector are exempted. Not certain how this section can be allowed to pass into an act. Yeah. Then there is increase of the marginal rate of tax from 30% to 35%. Okay. Now, the bill proposes to amend the individual rates of tax provided under Ed B of the third schedule to the Income Tax Act to the following. Number one, taxable amount. Let's look at taxable amount. On the first 288,000 Kenya shillings, 10%. On the next Kenya shillings, 100,000, 25%. On the next 5.6 million Kenya shillings, 30%. On all income above Kenya shillings 6 million, 35%. Now, we feel this proposal increment of the individual tax rate is likely to drive high-earning individuals, including expatriates, employees, and entrepreneurs, to other countries with lower taxes. This will not only lead to a drain of skilled labor out of the country, but will also counteract the government's efforts to make Kenya an attractive destination for international workers and individual investors. It is therefore a proposal that the bill is most deleterious. Okay, so that's a nutshell, our memorandum on the bill. But I also shared with you some of the positives on the bill. So we feel that these are some of the critical areas they need to look at. We chose to look at the impact on the various laws that impact on our lives.
Okay.
And we think that, and I hope that really, besides the political rhetoric you hear, I just wish Parliament could first of all really consider. I think it's about 860 memoranda from what I read from members of the public, and this is really in compliance with Article 10 of National Values and Principles of Governance, which requires public participation. I hope Parliament will not just pass this law because of political expediency. Let them debate it. Let them look at the critical, insights from Kenyans. And
They actually go proposal after proposal. They should go through proposal after proposal.
Yeah,
As
they should.
tell
They
us.
should. Yeah,
Okay.
and Kenyans have given views.
All right. In the interest of time, I'll just go very quickly through the positives that, of course, you shared. It's 20 minutes past time. I'll just go very quickly through the wins in the proposed bill 2023-2024. First is that the due date for capital gains tax, which is CGT payment, there has always been a dispute on when the CGT is due. Currently, the income tax ITA provides that the due date for taxpayers in respect of the property transferred is on or before the date of the application for transfer of the property is made at the relevant land office. The bill provides elucidation to reduce dispute. The bill proposes to change current provisions such that CGT is paid at the earlier of 1, receipt of the full purchase price by the vendor, and 2, registration of the transfer. Right? Interest restriction by amending Section 16 of the ITA. Current interest can only be deducted to a maximum of 30%, and in the current ITA, this includes all the interest, including that incurred in respect of loans received from resident and non-resident persons. In addition, non-deductible interest cannot be carried forward to be deducted in future years. The proposal is interest incurred from loans from residents will no longer be subject to interest restrictions. This is welcome. Loans from the resident resources will no longer have a restriction on the amount that can be tax deducted. Introduction of the qualifying intellectual property income. Current income from intellectual property is subject to tax at the rate of 30% or 37.5% for branches proposed. The bill proposes to introduce a preferential tax rate to qualifying intellectual property income. All right. However, the bill needs to be to clarify the preferential tax rate and what constitutes qualifying intellectual property. Introduction of capital allowances for industrial building docks at 10%, which was previously non-existent. Reduction of withholding tax on lease premium on immovable property and residential income from 10% to 7.5%. Proposed tax amnesty on interest and penalties, current and nothing in place. The bill proposes to introduce Section 37E, which empowers the Commissioner to issue a waiver on interest and penalties for principal taxes that were due and had been paid before the 1st December 2022. Where the principal tax has not been paid by 31st December 2022, a taxpayer can apply for amnesty on interest and in penalties on the unpaid tax that have accrued up to 3rd December 2022. The taxpayer must propose a payment plan for the outstanding amount and committing to pay all the outstanding principal taxes no later than 30th June 2024. This is a welcome move. Exemption of liquefied petroleum gas (LPG) from VAT. Current applicable is 8%. The bill proposes to amend the VAT Act by deleting this provision and including LPG under the exemption schedule, first scheduled to the Act, to the VAT Act. Okay. Introduction of VAT exemptions on certain goods. Current not in place. Proposed. The bill proposes to exempt various goods from VAT. Some of them include other medicaments containing alkaloids or derivatives thereof put up in measured doses or forms of packaging for retail use. Diagnostic or laboratory reagents on backing. Prepared diagnostic or laboratory reagents, whether or not on backing, whether or not put up in the form of kits for malaria and blood grouping vaccines for human. So in short, medical related stuff. All goods in Legislation Chapter 88, which deals with aircraft, spacecraft, and thereof. Taxable goods for direct and exclusive use in construction. Talk about construction materials and all that. I think there also get some exemptions. All tea sold for the purpose of value addition before exportation, subject to approval by the Commissioner of Customs. So tea for export as well has been exempted from the VAT. Okay. Reduction of import declaration fee (IDF) from 35% to 2.5%, and railway development levy (RDL) from 2% to 1.5%. In nutshell, those are the wins that has been proposed by the bill. So, right, 1 minute, 1 minute. I'll start with you, good brother Michael.
But 1 minute is...
Okay, I'll give you 2.
Yeah, so 2 things. One, you remember I was talking about the 4 R's of taxation, and I wanted to finish with the last R, which is repricing. So if you look at the bill and the proposals that it makes on excise duties and excise levies, a lot of the intended outcome of this is actually to reprice a lot of these commodities. So for instance, and including VAT, or generally what we would call stealth tax. So VAT and excise duty, the taxes that you pay without even you knowing that you're paying, because it is included in the price of the commodity. So as mentioned there, the bill is effectively using VAT to reprice the cost of cooking gas, for example, on a positive note. But it is also using VAT to reprice the price of petrol in terms of increasing it to 16%. Secondly, I think there are also other areas that the bill has focused on that are minor but very important. Particularly the discretion of cabinet secretaries in the past to approve exemptions. There were a lot of areas. I don't have to go through the entire list, but Ministry of Health had a lot of discretion on approving exemptions. Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Tourism, and these exemptions were not defined by law or by policy. So it was upon the discretion of the cabinet secretary to approve that exemption. And I think that is where the bigger debate, over the last few months of some people being given tax exemptions came from. Now, if you look at the bill, all these areas are now vatable. So they have moved from exempt to vatable 16%. So that discretion then reduces the opportunities for abuse of office, or abuse of powers of the cabinet secretary to grant exemptions to certain sectors. On the question of you raised the issue of forex losses. I think my simple way to look at it is that the state is actually running from its responsibility, because one, forex is a monetary policy issue. But now we are using fiscal policy to address a monetary policy issue. It is the responsibility of the state to manage the macroeconomic framework in such a way that the exchange rates become stable. In other words, businesses, you have an opportunity to, businesses then have an opportunity to operate in a stable forex environment where there are no, very huge fluctuations over a period of time. That will automatically obviate the need for that proposal that the bill is having on that. And then, of course, finally is the question of, when we talk about repricing, the finance bill has also used certain opportunities in this case to be able to address challenges that have to do with prices of commodities. Now, the problem which I see running through certain sections of the bill is that the technicality of either zero rating or exemptions does not necessarily lead to price reduction. Let me give an example. If you zero rate end product, if you zero rate bread, for example, which means that the manufacturer of the bread can then claim VAT refund on the final product, on the inputs. If you zero rate the end product, which is the bread, but you don't zero rate the other inputs,
the raw materials,
there will be no difference. In fact, in certain cases, the price of the bread will actually go up. Yes, on the consumer eventually. So at the face value of it, it looks like the zero rating is repricing the final end product. But in the actual sense, it is actually increasing the price of that commodity. Because take, for instance, for you to produce bread, you need fuel. you need electricity, you need packaging. For instance, unga. There is now a tax on craft. Craft is, there's some thin layer for packaging of unga. If you look at the packet for the unga, previously it was not vatable, but now it is vatable. Now, you may want to reduce the price of unga, but by increasing the tax on craft, which is used in packaging of unga, you are actually increasing the price of unga itself, because of the inputs that we are talking about. So I think there needs to be that clarity in terms of what then can manufacturers, for example, treat as tax deductible. What can they claim a tax refund on based on either the input or the final end product of that particular commodity. So I think that clarity is something that the bill needs to have. Thank you.
Okay. John, leo ni darasa, watu watume fees kwa daktari. Mimi hata nikisoma hiyo kitu sielewi. Kwanza wakianza kusema delete section X and replace with Y. Peter Bowen, housing levy should be optional. Increment of fuel tax from 8% to 16% should be removed for survival of Kenya Kwanza in 2027. All right. Wanjiku March.
Wametumiwa memo.
Wampata memo sasa.
Yes, wametuma Nick Cornelius.
Okay. Wanjiku March, amnesty, the ordinary person has no room to wiggle. How about all that have been evading taxes? Are there any penalties? Raid should listen to people. Rais should listen to people and hustlers, as he had called them. Apart from Kenya iuzwe tu, kila mtu apewe pesa yake. We get absorbed with the rest of the countries in the world. Joel Rama, Chairman, Diaspora, thank you, Wakili Aukot, for the summarized bullet points. Please include the page numbers on the bill itself for quick reference, or we can continue the discussion. This is by far the most consequential bill for Kenya, and if not reviewed, the impact would be disastrous to all Kenyans. Basi nikuna kiendaje kwa muganga, don't expect a refund. Okay, Morogo, the ordinary people are the ones who will suffer a lot in this bill. Abonsara, 83% is a pyramid. I don't need a house nor my children. I'm still paying my mortgage. Na nimejipanga na watoto wangu. Wape pesa ya those funds for anger. Iko kwa mifuko ya watu au viongozi wenyewe wafanyie wa Kenya personally. I don't need. Full stop. But you no escape route for ordinary citizens in Kenya. Left, right, and center, he or she should be heavily taxed. You would be refunded your contribution with a small interest after a period of time. The collector would simply build the houses, rent them, and refund your contribution. I would not be surprised if this happens. But meanwhile, the Hustler Fund is in phase 2, and we are told Kenyans are happy. Good morning, Gerald. Daniel, good to see you. Daniel, good morning to you. All right, tackle of the day, Doctor.
No, I think all I would just say to Kenyans is that I think let's not leave this debate to financial experts, economists, or to lawyers, or to the politicians. I think let's take time. Find time, read this bill, read it in the context of your economic status, and lobby your representatives. Like Michael Azebli said, a tax regime has those 4 elements, one of them being representation. So what is your representative actually saying about this? They must be able to relate what you are going through in your constituency, in your ward, to the law that's being proposed. I think I will encourage tacklers to be avid readers of, especially of policy documents, of laws that impact on their life. And I think here, I want to wish everybody a good weekend.
Good Friday. Okay. All right. The bill is on the comment section, so if you want to go through the memorandum, the memo on the bill, please check out the comment section. There's a Google link right there that has been posted. Please check it out and enjoy. So make sure you download, just in case we end the broadcast and it disappears. Michael, your tackle of the day.
Yeah, I think for the first time we are seeing very good debate around finance bill. I think I've been following the budgeting process for the last 10 years.
Everyone is talking about it.
I don't think there is any year in these last 10 years that we have had such a heated debate on the finance bill. And it is an opportunity for us Kenyans to take advantage of this. I think we need to be aware of the fact that, one, our constitution provides for, and very, in a very detailed context, provides for public participation. And we should take advantage. And it is not just public participation at the national level, it's public participation at national and county level. So we should take advantage of this as Kenyans to engage on matters that will directly affect our lives. Secondly is the issue of understanding that tax, even though paying tax is a painful process, the reality of tax is that tax should benefit those citizens that pay tax. Now, I remember about 10 years ago, about 9 years ago, we had a discussion with a group of taxpayers from Sweden. And they were calling themselves Association of Happy Taxpayers. And I was a bit perplexed that a taxpayer can be happy. And they actually told us that their tax rate is much higher than what we have it in Kenya. Yes. But they're still happy, even though their tax rate is 70%. So if we can engage our government, we can engage our state officers, so that our taxes work for us, then we wouldn't be having this debate of the tax rates are high. Because in any case, as long as you see benefits,
you still be getting the basic services.
Exactly. So,
okay.
One time I was traveling with a friend, sorry to take you back. It was from Sweden. It was actually a Kenyan national. We were going to South Sudan. And at that time, I think we had just kind of recovered from the Ebola. And you know what he told me? He told me, as we pay 70%, and we actually work to pay for taxes. Why? Because for them, medical care is free. Education is free. Once they retire, they get a retirement package which really will enable them live a dignified life. And he was telling me, if today Ebola broke here, I'll call Sweden and the air ambulance will evacuate me, but you will not be evacuated. That's exactly what I told me. They will send an air ambulance all the way from Stockholm to pick him. Mimi nitabaki hapo nikiomba sijui Air Force.
Taxes that work.
Yes, taxes that work. And imagine they are very proud to pay it. So you're right. They say they are very happy taxpayers.
And I think they brings out, of course, the conversation on taxes versus representation. I mean, where do you see your taxes ending up in? Right? This has been the Sheria Wiki edition of the 2nd of June 2023. And we're having a conversation about unpacking the Finance Bill 2023-2024 to ensure that you can have a better perspective of the state of things and the proposals that are coming your way. And then you can make an informed decision and conversation around it. I hope you've learned something new, but even as you learn something new, please tuende mashambani, please ensure you can get your animal feeds from Fugo Feeds by Unga Farm Care East Africa Limited. If you're a farmer, mkulima wa kuku, mkulima wa nguruwe, mkulima wa samaki, mkulima wa ng'ombe, please ensure that you can get your animal feeds from Fugo Feeds or Unga Farm Care East Africa Limited. We guarantee you not only of guaranteed quality in terms of guaranteed nutritional balance and formulation, but we also give you an opportunity to ensure that your animals are safe from any feed or toxins. If your production is guaranteed, your market prices as well is the best. Chukua kuku pale sokoni, mambo inakuwa shwari. Makuku wako pia wanataga mayai safi zaidi, quality, and also your body weight. Body weight animals is the best of it all. So please ensure that you can get to the nearest agrovet and get your Fugo Feeds from Unga Farm Care East Africa Limited. Wanjiku Maja anasema, that is why Sweden is stingy with its citizenship and residency. All right, it's been a pleasure having you. Enjoy your weekend and see you again on Monday. Bye-bye.